go ahead and welcome everybody to our
Welcome.
Beyond the Field. Yep, we're really joined tonight. We're really looking forward to a wonderful conversation on the topic of sport for development and peace, making the case. I'm Eli Wolff. I'm instructor in the sport management program, and I'm joined by a colleague, Pharlone, who was co-moderating with me, and we just have a wonderful group of panelists. Our panelists are Hillyer from Tennessee, and we just talked about some rivalries, so we may get into that a little bit later. We're also joined by Batouly, a graduate of UConn, a legendary, basketball player, and I won't go into too many accolades. I won't embarrass Batouly, and but also amazing entrepreneur, innovator in the space of sport for development, and created Awake, founder and CEO, and really emerging leadership. So many accolades. I won't go into too many of those. And then we've also got Richard, though, with many hats as well, which is part of this. Is the whole panel has a lot of different perspectives and different hats, and so that's sort of part of the conversation today. Is how do we engage in this field of sport for development and make that case? Richard comes as one of the co-editors of the Journal of Sport for Development. So part of that conversation is around the evidence and the research. So we'll probably ask Richard to speak to that as well. And so part of the conversation today is going to be looking at how do we make the case. We're coming off of the International Day of Sport for Development and Peace, which was on April 6th of each year. And it's a great moment to celebrate and reflect and think about what's happening in our world and the power of sport. And so part of what we're going to do in our conversation today is we're going to have a conversation about how do we make the case. We're also going to look at barriers and challenges. We're going to talk a little bit about new ideas, new innovations in the space. And then we're going to have some conversation about kind of what is our call to action, or what are some ways we can share knowledge, whether that's a book or whether that's something of inspiration that moves us forward. And so before we sort of get into our rounds, our first round, I'm going to turn it over to Pharlone just to share some remarks and to welcome us and to kind of get us thinking as well. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Pharlone.
Thanks, Eli. I don't think you guys understand how long I have known Eli Wolff. He is a huge positive motivating factor in the fact that I am in this field of work. And I don't mean to embarrass you, but I definitely would not be here without your leadership, without your mentorship, and without your support. Because I thought I made up sport for social change when I was in high school, coaching basketball and doing like 360, services for my athletes. And I was like, this is a thing. Like what I'm doing is a thing. And Eli was already doing that thing. And so it's amazing to have been a friend, colleague, mentor of yours for the last 15 years. It's been 15 years. And I have been able to do some incredible things in sport for development through you, with you, and I'm just really proud to be here. As a person who participated in sport for development programming as a young person, to go from a program participant to a program administrator to the next level and the next level and the next level, it's just been an incredible journey to watch the growth and development of sport for development in my lifetime. And I'm honored to be with Sarah, Richard, and Batouly today because I'm excited to hear about what you guys have seen in your journeys along this timeline and time frame of celebrating sport for development. I also want to share that a part of my work has not only been in direct service, but I have also been a member of the Laureus Sport for Good USA team for the last couple of years, where I have been able to support grant making to organizations that are using sport as a tool for youth development. That has been a sweet spot of mine for the last couple of years. And I have been able to travel the world with my opportunity at Laureus. It's been incredible. And so with that, I just want to share with you all that I'm going to spice things up tonight and be the one that pokes some holes in our work, because I can do that because I have such faith and belief in it. I have no problem questioning its validation because I am a product of the work. And so, Sarah, Richard, Batouly, I hope you still like me after this panel, but I'm looking forward to this great conversation. Eli, back to you.
Excellent. So yeah, why don't we go ahead and get our first round started, and we'll go ahead and start with Sarah, and then we'll go to Richard and then Batouly. And Sarah, being the amazing leader that you are with the Center for Sport and Peace and your work with the Global Sports Mentoring Program and just your visionary work around the world. We'll start with you just to share, making the case for sport for development piece. Like give it, a couple minutes, obviously can't say everything, but if you had to, give your best shot at how do you really make that case?
My best shot, huh?
The importance and yeah. We'll start with you, yeah.
Well, when Pharlone was talking, I was thinking, oh, I get what's happening here now. This is an intergenerational conversation, and I'm the oldest one here. That is what is happening. Because I was doing sport for development and peace in 1993 is when I started this work. So it was way before it was a thing, right? So when 2000 rolled around, I was like, yes, we have a name for this thing. And it's really what I've reflected on today, because when you think about the history of sport for development and peace, when the United Nations recognized it as a thing, as we mentioned, and was really able to make the claim that it's a low cost, high impact tool to advance at the time, the Millennium Development Goals, it all of a sudden gave all of these fledgling activities, it gave us a home, it gave us a sense of belonging, it gave us a community, it gave us a team. And so as I think about the field, right, if you take all of human history, which is forever ago, and then you say sport for development and peace became a thing in 2000, we're only 21 years old. We are babies, but look at the progress that we've made by having the infrastructure and just the name and the ability to come together as a community to do this work. So Eli's heard me say this for years, and Pharlone, I will echo what you say. Eli is a master networker and connector. And that is the beautiful thing, because Eli epitomizes our belief that social change is a team sport. We cannot do this without each other. And I know we'll get to this with challenges, because funding is always a challenge, and I'm so sick of talking about it. If we can get past seeing one another as competitors in this space, and to realize that if we will unite strategically and with intentionality, there is so much more we can do. And so that would be, I think, my case is we are so young, we're making so much impact, and the potential, we are only scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So now over to Richard's up next to share his thoughts and make that case.
What an opening, right? How do I follow that, Sarah? No, a lot has been said about sport for development. But Pharlone made the point, right? A lot of us are probably already believers of sport for development here, right? The thing that really stands out for me, and really, when you invited us to speak on this, the word you used was tangible, right? Like what makes sport for development tangible and a legitimate change-making vehicle and avenue. And I think there's a couple of things that stand out for me. The first is that this is one of the most kind of entrepreneurial means of change-making in terms of how it started, right? It's not like some big corporate sports entity invented sport for change and then tried to, seed it across the world and people adopted it. Like this started at the very grassroots simultaneously, across the world. Like Pharlone's story of, oh, I thought I invented sport for change and, I didn't know other people were doing that. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard that I have the same experience. I created a sport and a social enterprise through sport. And I remember when it's funny, I used to work for Laureus as well. And the reason I found Laureus is I tried to buy the domain Sport for Good. And then I found out that someone owned it. So I did a reverse lookup on who owns the domain. I found this organization, Laureus. I was like, oh my goodness, there's a whole organization doing sport for change. So, the fact that pockets around the world, disconnected from each other, landed on the kind of same outcome, even if it wasn't evidenced in the early days, right? And we knew sport was doing something good. That to me is one of the biggest indications that this is a very legitimate thing. The other thing that, again, 20 years is not a long time when you think of, humanitarian impact and the way that other domains of change making have evolved. But the other thing that really legitimizes sport for development for me is that it started in the grassroots. It has been recognized, academically, and it's been recognized sociopolitically. The thing that really, I think, takes it to the next level, and this is actually one of the reasons I joined the journal is we wanted to create a new avenue for voices, but we're starting to see that the expertise and the best practice and learning is actually not just coming from academics anymore. You've got founders and CEOs and practitioners that are able to leverage observational impacts and turn that into learning and share that, right? And so it's really the democratization of how sport for development started, and the fact that now leadership has also been democratized when we talk about, who can push the sector forward. So I'm actually really excited to talk about kind of opportunities and spaces to go, because I've done a lot of thinking and writing in the kind of future-proofing aspect of sport for development. And I'm less interested in what we've done, and I'm more interested in the intersectionality of things we haven't thought about yet. So yeah, really glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Look forward to diving into this with all of you.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you. And so now we have Batouly for just a short, you're kind of making the case of the power of sport for social change, sport for development, and kind of all the great work you've been doing, and to kind of be able to speak to that a bit. So over to you, Batouly.
That was hard for Richard to follow up, and I don't know. I don't know what's left for me. But again, I think so well said. And I think Sarah made a great point that, this is something new, but if you look throughout history, and for me, really focusing on the African continent, like if you really look at this, it's been around for such a long time, and you cannot talk about, sport for impact without talking about the national, the culture, the social, economical, the political boundaries, when done right, of what sport has done just universally. And so that is always something to make a case for. And the number one thing in terms of what Richard said for the future is, how do we measure impact? I think that has been the hardest case. We are all a believer. We know the importance of sport for development, but saying, how do we measure impact when there's, such great strides that happen and take place, universally in different places, and saying, how do we come together to really measure that in different ways? And so I will keep mine short, because I think there's so much more to be said, but again, just so universal on different levels, and so many areas we haven't explored yet, and the future is so bright for that. So I would definitely keep it short. I think they made a great case for that.
That's good. I'll turn it over to Pharlone now to take us into some of our barriers, challenges, and kind of where next step on the conversation.
Yeah, so I mean, it's clear that we're all on the same page here, right? I'm loving the vision. I'm loving the talk about what we need to work on, what our opportunities are. But let's be honest here. When you guys are talking to the people that are not in the bubble, are not in the circle, and you're like, yes, I believe that sport and physical activity have the ability to make a tangible change in the life of a person or in a community. And they're like, huh? How, Sway? Like, make it make sense. You know, are they wrong for that? And what is your response to that? Like, how do you like tell them that it's true and not just because you say so?
You can switch up the order for Pharlone, you know, if you want to, however you want to go.
Richard, want to take it first?
Sure. I think, I mean, I remember when I first got into the field, even my family members, they were like, "What do you're just playing sports for a living? Like, what's going on here?" And it's very interesting because I think that's common for the people in the sector that are trying to take the sector beyond its existing bubble. You know, even when we think about funding, it's usually the same funders moving around funding the same organizations or different organizations. And as a sector, it's been challenging, I suppose, to grow the size of interested stakeholders, however they may be interested. I found that obviously the biggest converter is experiencing the actual work itself, whether that's seeing the photos or the videos, and that may seem very obvious. I think the other thing that certainly I've used as a tool to convince people to investigate further, right? Because people could investigate and maybe it's just not for them, is to leverage some of the incredible stories of change that actually exist across the sector. You know, a lot of you probably know the story of an organization called Skateistan. Some of you may not, but for me, I often share their story as my conversion story because it makes the change very relatable. You know, effectively, as it was explained to me by their founder many years ago, they found out that in Afghanistan at the time, and I don't know what it's like today, but it was illegal for girls to do sport, right? And if you just say that to someone, like, it's illegal for girls to do sport, right? They have a mother, they have a sister, they have a daughter, like that is very relatable, right? And then you kind of go on to this idea that Afghanistan as a country has a list of what is a sport, right? And this guy, Ollie, found out that skateboarding wasn't on that list, which means it wasn't illegal for girls because it wasn't a sport, right? And to then go in and say, I'm not breaking the rules, but I'm giving this group of people access to something really, you know, that's going to change their lives. And then evidence, you know, and then the evidence backs that up. Like, you know, literacy rates and education rates amongst girls were, you know, like less than 20%, 15%. And through this program, he was able to pump it up. But I think that's just one story. I like that because it's so dramatic. Sports are illegal for girls, right? Like that stands out. But, you know, you see the really groundbreaking work that organizations like Waves for Change to do through surf therapy, right? And again, I think sometimes the extremeness of outcomes, you know, surfing can address and support and help very severe traumatic mental health situations. That polarization, I think, makes it's a great hook, right? And obviously that's a hook whether we're talking to engaging people into participating in programs or otherwise. But certainly I think we as a sector have such a remarkable collection of stories that we can share. And that doesn't mean that your program has to do something extreme, but certainly if we're talking about people that don't get it or they need something relatable, I find those are very useful in getting people to explore further.
Yeah. Batouly, tell me really quickly, you know, you've been doing some fundraising, some work and trying to get more people engaged with your work in Guinea. Like, tell us, what has been the challenge for you? What has been, you know, the struggle for you?
You know, I think Richard just hit on some great points. And for me, I would say shifting from being an athlete and now, you know, in this space full time, the initial selling point for me was just sport at large. This is over a $600 billion industry, sport at large. How does sport play a role in your life? Again, coming from, university where sport, basketball is particularly popular. How do you kind of navigate sport as a community and what it means in your life, and, how it's been an intergenerational approach for you, and how you bond through games. And so for me, I think that has been kind of the ultimate, catch. And then you go into the sport, the youth industry, and that being $1 billion industry as well, and saying, we have all of these, ideas, and we know how important sport is, and then saying, okay, well, this is sport for impact and for development and for change, and, amazing stories that you share. So for me, the entrance is a bit different in terms of just, okay, sport at large, and then getting more into this, sector, and saying, I wouldn't be here if not for these sport programs. This is how I benefited from it. And so we see the sport industry, but how come it doesn't translate to sport for development? And so I think kind of painting in that way has really helped. And for me as a personal athlete, and having that, connection, and then really getting into that space. And it's been really, it hasn't been easy in terms of, fundraising, because everyone is constantly talking about, okay, impact and return on that. And it's like, yes, this is an investment towards the future and towards young people stepping into their limitless potential. This is something that you'll be a part of forever, and building that legacy. But really, especially in today, it's been tough, just in the spirit of transparency, and I think Sarah said something amazing, and now I'm remembering, is we're in this sports space together. There shouldn't be that level of high competition that there is across, and that we're in this together, that I've been kind of running into, and it's, it's all new to me, and still navigating that space. But for the most part, it's been tough. But I would say for those who are connected, if you're able to really paint that bridge and paint that picture clearly of the work that we're doing, the important stories that there is, and saying, this may not, right now in Guinea ranks number 6 overall for lack of, literacy rate for young girls and completing secondary education, and saying, sport is a vehicle for change, and it's an alternative, that provides a means, and that provides job opportunities, and that provides success, and women being empowered in that sense. And so once you paint it that way, I think those who may not be in the space feel much more compelled to enter it and to learn more. And then again, you add them as a contributor, and you become a master networker like Eli, and try to spread that. But it's always something, and being innovative today is important more than ever.
Yeah. So Sarah, if the State Department called you today and said they were going to give you an unlimited budget, to use sport to change the United States of America, what would be the first thing that you did?
The very first thing I would do is call Eli Wolff, because he is going to know where and how to network us, to identify those who do quality work with integrity and the greatest needs. And then we would begin matching what those are. That would be the first thing I would do. In all seriousness, I would call Eli.
That's a smart move.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all agree.
Richard, what would you do with an unlimited budget?
Oh man, I was waiting for the opportunities section to talk about this. One of the things that I would bring actually to the sector is something that I benefit from, which socially disappeared. But no strings attached funding for people to fail. Yeah. So when I started my social enterprise, like I remember 100%. I reached out to a couple corporates, and they just said, "Here's $5,000. You're telling us you're doing something good. We like it. Go do it." And that $5K actually allowed me to build up to $250K over the next 5 years, and we made change. But if I had to do what I did in 2010 now, I don't think unless I borrowed money from friends or family, or was able to kind of bootstrap it myself, I don't think I would be sitting here, because I wouldn't have been able to do that. And so I think that the sector needs access to more sources of no strings attached funding, that small amounts, like it doesn't have to be large risk, but something where if it doesn't work and your idea fails, that's okay. Because I think we're kind of choking the future of the sector by making everything particularly in like year one, so evidence-based. And that's not to, I agree with Batouly, we need to better evidence our impact, but in year kind of like 1, 2, 3, I think giving people a runway to try something new is actually really healthy for the sector. So I'd put money into kind of open, no strings attached funding.
Richard, I agree so much. I say to the university all the time, and to really a lot of our partners, we actually are not in the business of sport. Sport is one part of what we do. We are in the business of entrepreneurship. It is all about social innovation. And we have to be willing to be okay with tremendous amounts of risk taking and failure to figure it out. And so I concur 100% with what you're saying.
Well, I mean, truthfully, like, you know, to some of the grant funders out there, $5,000, $10,000 is not a lot of money, but that's like transformational money to someone trying to start an idea.
Absolutely.
Right? How do you enable trust without trust being attached to outcomes?
Yeah. Eli, I messed the whole agenda up. I'm sorry. These people are just so good to talk to.
No, it's perfect.
I don't want to waste my time with them. I'm sucking up all this information.
No, it's excellent. Any other follow-up points or anything else before we kind of, any other points any of the panelists would like to make on, big points on barriers, challenges, or?
I mean, I would definitely call Batouly and Pharlone because they're fellow basketball sisters. I mean, we definitely do some basketball stuff together for sure. But nothing else. I think challenges, I mean, they're vast, but they're nothing we can't overcome. Again, if we shift our mindset to seeing each other as teammates in this space, I think there's tons of potential. So maybe we get to Richard's question about innovation.
Yeah, I wanted to shift into the innovation and kind of the big ideas and the future, kind of like what's really going to help to that kind of tipping point of whether it is that innovation or entrepreneurship or, I know, for example, like esports is one area that I would love for Richard to touch on a little bit. I also think there's just aspects of just how we're organizing and collective action kind of innovation that we've already started touching on a little bit. But also just kind of the next generation and how this is becoming more, more seamless in the industry. Sport for development is becoming a thing in all sectors. And so, but yeah, so why don't we do a couple-minute round on your kind of big ideas? And so maybe we'll start with Batouly, then Richard, then Sarah. If Batouly's ready, if not, you can pass it on to someone else.
Yeah, I might need to pass it.
Pass it on. We'll start with Sarah then. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, Sarah's ready.
Batouly, were you a point guard?
At 6'2", I thought I was.
Yeah, I mean, at UConn, you guys have big point guards, but all right, I was a shooting guard. So the fact that you passed it to me is quite appropriate. Like if you kicked it out, right? So I'll take the shot. Yes. Okay, innovations. So Pharlone mentioned it. We are in partnership with the U.S. Department of State and ESPN and a number of amazing corporate partners. So they are epitomizing this idea that social change is a team sport. The State Department funds us, for me to say this, it's sometimes hard for me to believe. And I'm so grateful for their partnership because from 1993 until 2012, almost 20, wait, is that 20 years? 21, that's a long time, 20 years, right? I funded this work on bake sales, car washes, and every part-time job I could find, a substitute teacher, basketball referee, basketball umpire, whatever gave me the flexibility that if a country called us to bring a women's sports team to do friendly matches, disaster relief, anything we could do. And that work happened in 35 countries that we were just taking little ragtag teams of student athletes and former student athletes to do, as Richard said, this super grassroots work. And I was in Iran for 10 years, 1 month every year in Iran. We were the first American female athletes to be there since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And over that 10 years, I had the privilege of helping them develop their women's sports system. But it was the craziest thing because they asked me to introduce fast pitch women's softball. It wasn't even an Olympic sport then. So it was so strange. So I found out the first softball class that I went to, I just collected a bunch of equipment from the Lady Vol softball team and headed there, not having any idea. I get there and I'm standing in a university classroom with 60 women looking at me. And they tell me, we have no idea what softball is. We've never seen it. We've never heard of it. We have no clue what we're here for. We just know we're here to learn a new sport. So we had to co-create a Farsi English language for the sport. We co-constructed the game, pulling on their indigenous game. I'm not even answering your question, but we pulled on all the local.
I think I know where you're going. This is definitely going where I think you're going.
Okay. Tell me when I get there so I can stop. But
it's just about like the ideas that you don't think are ideas, and then they become the thing.
Yeah. And so after those 10, there are 17 women's softball teams now in Iran still playing. Still, they compete internationally and so on. So while I was there, I started thinking, like, I can't keep funding this with bake sales and car washes. It has to scale. And literally, it's how I ended up at the University of Tennessee. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to learn how to write a grant. And I guess I'm going to have to learn how to do research so I can come home with more than anecdotal evidence. Yeah. So I did my PhD in sports sociology to learn how to do those two things, thinking I would go back to the nonprofit world, but armed with a new skill set. Yeah. But while I was here, I was like, wait a minute. Or I could tackle higher education and disrupt the way we look at sport management, sports psych, all of the sport-based, so that when the new generation of students graduates and they go to an Apple or a Google or a Under Armour or a New Balance, when they go, this idea for sport and social impact is not novel. It is an integral part of their entire educational experience. And that's why I stayed at UT. And that's why we created the center. So I think more innovation around the way we educate, the way that we see possibilities, leveling up our skills to really make sure that we're not just sports people, but we bring skills, actual skills to the table. And that we're not just, I hear it from students all the time, I just want to work with people. I just love people. Well, sweetheart, that is great, but I need you to have some skills. And so I think that's part of it. I'm really sorry.
That was way too much. No. That's excellent. So we're going to shift it, just kind of building off of Sarah's. Well, that was excellent to kind of get us thinking. And I think thinking about the here we are within UConn and all the universities. We have, folks from around the country, around the world, from educational institutions. So that is clearly an aspect of the conversation. But before we go to Richard, I just want to remind folks about the Q&A. So we have seen a few comments coming in, but we want to encourage folks to use the Q&A for comments, and we'll be addressing those shortly in the last 15 minutes or so. But why don't we go ahead and turn it over to Richard to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, so innovate. So it's very interesting because so I don't disagree with anything Sarah said, but I think innovation, because it's such a broad thing, it means so many different things to different people, right? So when I was at Laureus and subsequently when I joined Comic Relief, I was fortunate enough to be in the position that I was influencing where grants were made, right? And I think the combination of being able to influence grant making, but also coming from a background where seed funding got things off the ground, it really changed the way I looked at applicants. And the reason I bring that up is I think I would like to see innovation in a few different ways in the sector. So the other day I did an exercise where I took all of the sustainable development goals and I tried to find a sport for development organization that tackled each and every single one of them. And one of the things that's really interesting is, for example, life on land, life in water. They're surprisingly hard to find organizations that are doing environmental work. But why, right? If sport can be used as a curriculum-based method to educate on different topics, it can be used to drive efforts around conservation, and it can be used to, tackle climate change, for example. And I remember when I was at Laureus, I actually found an organization in Brazil, and their core remit was around ocean, cleaning the ocean and trying to tackle plastic waste. But interestingly, the way that they get funding was they sell themselves as a program that develops life skills and helps kids, move towards employment. And that always didn't sit well with me, because we actually need organizations that are doing different things. Like, we should celebrate an organization that says, I want to use sport to tackle ocean plastic. And so I've made it a mission to try and uncover organizations that are doing work in less common areas, because I think uplifting them is good for the sector. I'll shout out an organization called the Botswana Predator Conservation Trust, who are doing really great work through sport and conservation, but on very few people's radars because they're not mainstream. The topic isn't mainstream. So I'd like to see innovation in that perspective. Another thing that I think would be very exciting from an innovation perspective is starting to look at the intersection of sport for development and question mark. So I've been looking at, for example, sport for development and big data, right? How can big data actually improve our ability to develop outcomes? And I remember it's a couple of years, this is dated now, a few years ago, Street League, UK-based NGO, were doing some really cool stuff where they got some kind of special innovation funding from one of their partners to take their beneficiary data sets for the last 10 years and start to identify indicators of which beneficiaries were more at risk, and subsequently using that to inform their incoming cohorts of beneficiaries, using that to identify individuals in incoming cohorts that might be at greater risk of dropping out. Because naturally you have some beneficiaries that they'll take to the program and they will benefit greatly, and others that you need to put a lot more work into supporting. And just the notion of being able to apply some of these broader principles, machine learning, big data, leveraging artificial intelligence. I think there's a lot we can do with the data sets we've created, either as individual organizations or, subsections of the sector. How cool, like I know Laureus, for example, has their model cities, right? Like, what if you took all the data in a model city and were able to, draw some insights on that based on this computing capacity? So I'd like to see the intersection of that, right? So sport for development and whatever, like things we haven't yet played around with. I had a third point. Oh yeah, and the third point, the third thing is around esport. So I'd like to think I'm one of the early kind of pioneers on esport for change. And largely this is around the fact that there's a lot of reasons I think esport can be useful to the sport for development sector. I don't think it needs to replace entirely, traditional mainstream sports, but I think it creates an equitable playing field, because that playing field is virtual in some ways, that allows you to create certain groups of people or create interaction across groups that may not be useful otherwise. And also, don't get me wrong, esports comes with its limitations because, there's costs attached, et cetera, and accessibility. But if I take away some of that and think of it purely from a theoretical perspective, I think its ability to create parity between participants is something powerful to be explored. I think its ability to enable depth of outcome in a remote capacity, or perhaps enable people to participate that may not be able to travel to certain physical spaces. I think that's something to be explored. And I also think because esports is so nascent, whereas like when I look at the sports industry as a whole, there seems to be a bit of the CSR aspect of sports and sport for development seem to travel in parallel. But I think esport, as they look to gain market share and credibility and all of this, I think there's an opportunity for any change making through esports to really dovetail with sport for development and really get that right at the beginning. So I think those three, that's a lot of different places to explore innovation, but
that's great. Yeah.
As I said, that comes back to this idea that innovation is very broad. So sorry, I've been waffling, but
no, that's perfect. No, thank you Yeah, it's good just to get, different, that's why all three of you are leaders and thought leaders. And so being able to have you share with this audience and to engage. And so we'll now turn it over to Batouly for her thoughts on kind of future, kind of being where you are now, kind of in the, kind of coming into it, starting Wake in your role as a leader, emerging leader. What do you see as kind of the future? And we'll go ahead and tackle some of the questions coming in kind of after we do our round. So we'll be able to address those collectively. But go ahead, Batouly. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I'm just so interested to see, with the NIL and, with that soon passing, how we could, implement that and those changes and probably adding a discussion for sport for development. That's something I would love to explore. And I think so often, that conversation around, name, image, and likeness. But for me, I think if I was, still playing and in college, teaming up with an organization that's in the sport for development space. And now you look at, not everyone's going the NCAA route, so how do you talk about success? How do you talk about the BAL? How do you talk about, professionally in other countries or in Europe and saying, okay, how do we kind of tie in that sport for development for athletes in that regard who may not want to go directly into, that, or saying, these funds or these finances can go directly to programming or to a nonprofit or organization that I'm deeply connected with. So I'd be interested to explore, how we can educate student athletes in that regard and entering that into the conversations and universities at large. And for me, I think one thing that was mentioned early on is the social entrepreneurship space. And that is something that is so important. We talk about sport as transferable skills and, sport in new realms, I think is important to explore. And for us, saying that what better way to leverage those transferable skills in business and saying, here is fees and finances to fail early, and so I think that is something that we've definitely been trying to explore at Wake and that we're really excited about, and giving young people the opportunity to, explore their dreams and business in that regard while staying in sport. So I think Richard had some amazing points, like IT would be incredible. And I always go to the airport and I see the little projector and I'm like, this is incredible. Or like, robots in the supermarket. And I'm like, this would be amazing. And when you see, such a time as COVID, you see the disparities in who even has access to virtual programming and who doesn't. When you think of the gaming space, who has access to internet towers and who doesn't, who is really going to be left behind during these times in these spaces. And, even with sport minimal equipment, it's like competing globally. I think it's something we really have to figure out a way to cut the disparities and really level the playing field in that regard. So all of these things that, I think about, especially with student athletes in the NIL globally and really involving athletes in that regard. But I think definitely so much to think about. And I'm excited because I think more than ever now that there's a name to it, as Sarah said, so many people are taking action and want to be involved. And I think that part of diversity is huge, because even when I was entering the sports space in Wake early on, there were so many different things that I wanted to do, but it didn't fit the mold, when you are entering a community, there's so many different needs. But I think that's so encouraging to hear from Richard, especially from so many people I know who are on this call and who are interested in creating new and unique ways and unique things in sport for development. So I think that was a huge point to touch on, and not just saying this fits the grant, but this is actually something of need in this community, and it looks different and it's dynamic and it's changing, and we support that.
I just had a quick follow-up question on, again, going off script a little bit, but just want to get your thoughts briefly, whoever would like to chime in. But it seems like the intersection of sport for development and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and sport and human rights. Kind of would love for you to just share your thoughts on that, just in terms of, do you feel like there is kind of a lot of intersectionality? Do you feel like the diversity, equity, inclusion movement and the racial justice, gender equity, disability, like those movements could actually, learn a lot from sport for development, or kind of the way they relate together? So whoever would like to chime in on that, I just felt like that's an important conversation to have in the time we're in right now. I'm not sure, Batouly or Sarah, perhaps, or even Pharlone, chiming in on that one.
my answer would be simple, like, yes, yes. But
Kind of all this, similar movements, but how do they, yeah.
I think it goes back to intentionality, right? That I think, we just need to be aware. So education and things like this to make yourself aware of what's happening, and then some real intentionality and thoughtfulness and strategic thinking around it. It's kind of simple. I think the good thing about sport and what makes sport, and this is a very overgeneralized, so please don't, take it for what it's worth, is that there's a lot of appreciation for diversity and inclusion within sport. It happens more naturally. And I'm not saying it's a perfect space by any means, but if we can just build on what already exists, especially when you think about team sports, and really everything is a team sport. Even if you play an individual sport, you've got a coach and you've got trainers, and you get this team aspect. And so, but I say this all the time, and this is a really lame analogy, but Jay Leno, this is probably dated, like he's old, like talk show comedian. He collects cars, like he has hundreds of collectible cars. And I always say, if I were to walk into Jay Leno's garage with all of his cars, no matter how long I stood in that garage, I would never turn into a car. I wouldn't do it. It wouldn't happen. In the same way, just when we roll out a basketball onto the basketball court, or soccer onto the soccer field, or whatever that sport is, just because kids are showing up, we can't assume that what they're coming away with is anything good. That has to be the intentionality of those that are creating that environment. And so in the same way, I think that intentionality transfers to the ways that we approach diversity and inclusion, and really what diversity and inclusion movements can learn from space are those coaches and parents and those that are creating an environment that celebrates. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, as a question came to my head, I was
well, I know all the students now are like Googling who the heck is Jay Leno. That's what they're Googling.
Well, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Pharlone now for just a round on recommendations, call to actions, wisdom, but also Pharlone, maybe a different question you want to bring forward is also.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that I just disagree with everything Richard said, just so for the record. I'm just kidding. I told you guys I was going to spice things up. I totally disagree with everything he said. No, just kidding. I do want to add, though, what I would like to see and what I hope to do in the innovation space. I've been talking about this for a year or so now, but I'm hoping to actually bring the Olympics to Haiti. And, my understanding of the power of sport to change a community, when you think about what the Olympics can do for a society, it can either be very positive things or very negative things. And I see the great potential in the Olympic Committee thinking about what it would mean as they are really challenging themselves to be a better, impactful organization to bring the Olympics to a place like the island of Haiti. And I'm gonna leave that right there, because I know there's some people on this call who are gonna join my team when I decide to do this with my unlimited budget from the State Department. But as
youth Olympics, or the different,
listen,
or even the fall Olympics.
It's gonna be the whole shebang. I want Johnson and Johnson, Coca-Cola. Everybody is gonna be in Haiti. It's gonna be crazy. Stay tuned.
We need a whole nother webinar on that topic. That is a whole nother. That's next semester. That's our next.
Yes, volume 2. But no.
Yeah, pluses and minuses, the whole debate. It'll be good.
The whole thing. We're gonna do it. I'm telling you. But no, you guys. What I heard was just so inspiring from all three of you. I think, this space needs your voices to continue to shout at the top of your lungs about how esports needs to be examined as a potential source for the sport for development space, right? I think it's a wonderful idea. I think we should be thinking about all of the conversations that are coming up for student athletes at the NCAA and how something is brewing, something is changing, and you know what's going to happen. Change is going to come. That's just what's going to happen. And, you know, Sarah, like, to know that there is a whole generation of people coming into the world that had access to the center in Tennessee, and to know that, like, they will be the future of, you know, the folks at Nike, the folks at, you know, EA Sports, right? Like, these people have been influenced by your work, and they will take that into other spaces and other places. And so I'm really just proud to hear from all of you. I would just very quickly like to hear from you all, you know, what wisdom, what information, like what kind of like go with God story you could tell these people on this call here, because it's not enough that they get to hear about the cool stuff you get to do for work, right? It's important for people to also know like how sport for development has like changed you, done something for you, you know, been important to you. So if you could just give us some quick nuggets, like some gold, help us. Don't all come first.
I'll kick off.
Yeah.
I think the one, so I when I shut down my sport, my social enterprise, I made a very conscious decision not to go and start something else. I could have done that, but I felt that there are so many change makers out there. You know, we didn't need another organization. You know, Sarah said something right at the top of this conversation. How can we work together instead of kind of fragmenting the space further? So I spend a lot of my time trying to mentor and kind of invest advisory support in early stage change makers, whether it's sport or otherwise. And I think one of the most common things I see, and I'm sure in the 50 odd attendees we've got here, there's at least one person that is kind of on this cusp, but you've got people that have an idea for change that they want to bring to life. And the only reason it hasn't come to life yet is because they're kind of overcooking it in their head, right? And they're kind of, how do I get it perfect? How do I get it started, etc. And I think back to when I started Five Hole for Food. That was the name of the organization. We used ball hockey. I remember I was like 3 weeks from starting this campaign. We did a trip, and my mom said to me, "Richard, it looks like there's way too much going on. Why don't you just do this next year? Like, you don't have to start this year. Why don't you do it next year?" And if I'd waited a year, it wouldn't have started. I know that. And where this story is going is a lot of people stop themselves from starting something great because they're worried about it being perfect. And sometimes getting it off the ground, not sometimes, getting it off the ground is always going to be better than trying to get it off the ground perfectly. So for anyone that's out there that actually wants to start a grassroots organization or come up with their own model of change, just start. Mm-hmm. It's going to change 1,000 times, you know, from where you started anyway. There's no point trying to get it perfect because you're only stopping yourself from starting something great. So that's my go with God message.
That's fantastic.
I love that message. And I think that resonates with me so deeply because as I, you know, wanted to start Women and Kids Empowerment back in 2017, I just remember having this deep desire, and so many people didn't understand. It felt like a piece of my heart. It didn't feel like I was going home where I was giving back. It felt like I was giving into a piece of myself, and leaving, you know, young girls who are looking at me and saying, "I'm better than you. You know, I could be a Husky. I just need an opportunity to fight for my dreams." And I instantly remembered my journey through sport and having that same, you know, feeling, and seeing the WNBA and seeing that there was something higher than me, and feeling like I was compelled to do something, because it's unfair to have that vision or that dream set out and no way, no opportunity, no access, no resources to fight for that. And so I resonate with that deeply. And I always say, you have everything you need to start. Just go, just bring it in, you know, make a logo, start there. And the second thing is, you know, there were so many people who were willing to connect with me. So even when I started Wake in 2017, going to India, you know, for a month and saying, you know, how can I learn? How can I grow? How can we connect? And having people who were available and open in that space for me to learn and to grow, and saying, bring this back home. And I always had this quote, you don't have to invent the wheel, but you must do your part to keep it spinning where you see fit. And there are models that work, and young people want to take action more than ever, which is amazing. But also don't be afraid to reach out to existing organizations and get on the ground, you know, learn what you like, what you don't like. This is the best time, and having more spaces to fail supportively, which I had, and I'm so thankful for today. And there's no book for experience, you know, there's so much you learn on the ground. So be encouraged in the work that you're doing. It's really important, and bringing those creative ideas, because it won't look the same, but you're not in this alone. So I would just have to definitely echo that. And I've learned so much, and this is work that I want to do for the rest of my life. And I learn and I grow so much from these spaces. So, you know, start with what you have. You have everything you need, and you have all these amazing panelists supporting you in that journey.
That's awesome. Sarah, take us home.
I want to hug Batouly first, though. I just want to hug you. Oh my gosh. So I've been reflecting on this a lot lately, and I've been thinking, every story has a hero. Every hero has a superpower, and every superpower can be used for good or for evil, right? It depends on if it's in the hands of a hero or the villain. And when I was thinking about that, I was like, sport is our superpower. It holds tremendous potential and power in people's lives when it is in the hands of a hero. And I don't mean a sports hero. I don't mean a celebrity in sport. I mean a person that sees sport as something more than championship banners and rings and gold medals, that sees it as a transformational tool in the lives of people. So I am calling all heroes, which is all of us, students, as you are pursuing your life and your dreams. I promise you, promise, money is fine, and it makes life certainly more comfortable, but money does not make you happy. Making a difference in the life of just one other person is significantly more fulfilling than bringing home lots of dough. Trust me on this. So whatever it is, find your passion, your platform. What are your circles of influence? What are you passionate about? And your purpose in this life. And then put on your Spider-Man outfit, put on your cape, see yourself as a hero, and take the superpower of sport and change the world. And that, I would just leave it at that.
Slam dunk it, Sarah. Take us all the way to his.
Listen, I'm 5'5" white girl. I've never dunked in my life.
Yes, you just did it.
Dunk on Zoom. You can dunk on Zoom.
You just did it. That's awesome. That's awesome.
There needs one of those mini hoops behind her, right? And just a ball to just, you know, finish it.
Right there in the corner.
Oh, yam that thing. Listen, it's been truly incredible to talk to all of you. I'm just so honored to have been able to even been a part of this conversation. Keep up the fabulous work. There was a really interesting question in the chat that I kind of want to bring up really quick. Billy Graff. I hope I'm pronouncing
that was the one I was also hoping we touch on. Yeah.
Yeah, because this is a good one. This is spicy. Ooh.
For everybody.
So Billy,
yes. Yeah.
Billy was like, how do you debate sport for development in the context of large companies who are actually doing things against development, right? Like, this is messy, Billy. I love it. Ooh. So who wants to take this on first? Because I could talk about that for days and you do not want me to be the one. So how do you talk to organizations that are literally a part of the problem about using sport as a tool for development? Who's got it?
I'll take a stab at it, but don't crucify me.
We got your back.
So,
yeah, it's all team effort here, team effort.
So I think the way I'd approach it is trying to look at the net outcome, right? The reason we have 17 sustainable development goals is because of how complex our issues are, and an organization that's investing in positive change in one area, I don't think that is negated necessarily by issues in their supply chain that they need to improve. I think I'm gonna strike an optimistic tone and say we're at a time when companies are a lot more socially conscious about the impact that they're making, and that change will not come overnight, but the awareness of it, I think, is an indicator that, you know, if they are doing social good in one space and they are aware, we will see change in the less positive aspects of the industry. I'm also a bit of a pragmatist and a realist, and we don't live in this utopic society, and so that's why I come at it and say, if on the net of impact is positive, that's a starting point, right? Mm. So that's where I would begin to approach that question. I don't think it's fair to write off the good work done because, you know, an aspect or individuals or whatever might not be good actors in the space.
Very diplomatic of you, Richard.
Excellent. No.
Who else? Who wants to take this?
We have a couple more minutes, but yeah, no, it'd be great to hear just the final round. Yeah.
I don't have anything to add to that. I think the power of social media and the way athletes are stepping up now to voice in the way communities are, and just the holding companies to account. Yeah. I think it's just a matter of us raising our voices, putting on our superhero capes and calling companies to transparency. Yeah. And then giving them, right? It's not just about calling out the problem. I hated this about coaching, right? A coach that just constantly tells you what you're doing wrong, but not how to fix it. Tell me how to fix it. Yeah. And so if as a engaged citizen, we are calling companies to fix it, then let's also provide solutions and make that as easy for them as possible and as impossible for them to say no to.
That's beautiful. That's it right there.
Let's go beyond this takedown culture. I'm with you, Sarah.
Yeah. I would agree. We got to come with solutions.
Yeah, that's it right there. I think you should be satisfied, my friend, because they really slam dunked that. Billy, but do you have anything else to add to that? I think.
No, I was just going to say, and even with that, I think, you know, not just in terms of workshops, so we're actually reframing everything that you do in your entire, you know, organizational values. And the second thing is, you know, so often you see these large organizations and say, you know, we donated this large amount, X amount, and you never hear from it again. Where'd it go? You know, where was that? And so I think with that, when we come together and we act as a team, we're able to be stronger together. It's not just event-based, but it's actually in sustainable development and programming and ongoing programming, and really being intentional about that. So I think that's just another piece to add. That's really important.
Well, thank you all so much for, we're just here at the hour mark, and I just wanted to be able to, you know, thank you all so much for joining in today, and just the ability to have kind of this authentic and just, you know, sort of rapid fire conversation, and kind of where we are with the pulse of sport for development and peace, and how it intersects with so many other movements and different aspects. And that's just really with hope, you know, this is kind of the dream team of our, you know, kind of imagining this conversation. I was just so happy to be able to have, you know, Sarah and Richard and Batouly, and then to co-moderate with Pharlone is just so fun and so great, and just Pharlone's energy and being willing to ask the hard questions. And, you know, I think that's part of what this movement is about, is trying to just keep being real and keep pushing it forward. And, you know, and I think this is not the end of the conversation. You know, this is really a point in time. And so, you know, as we revisit it year to year, and as we keep moving, that we keep, you know, doing better, doing good. And again, just to reiterate this, I think what Sarah had to say, what Richard, what Batouly, you know, that the whole idea of the next generation, how they're gaining the knowledge, how they're understanding the field, what are they going to do, how are they going to be innovative? I mean, I guess to me that those are some of the key points. And so again, just thank you all for joining from around the country, from around the world. You know, thank you all. We'll stick around for a couple minutes. So if anyone else would like to make any comments as we close out, but maybe Pharlone or others, if any final shout outs or words to share. But thank you all for joining today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for putting this together. And Richard, Batouly, and Pharlone, what a pleasure and honor it is to be with you guys. And in true center fashion, I'm going to ask if we can take a flexi picture, because we always do strong people changing the world together. So we're going to need us, everybody to flex your muscle. All right.
Awesome.
Perfect. I love it. Yeah, everybody get your superhero on. There's so much we can do together. And I don't want to speak for Richard and Batouly, but I feel like I can. Students, if you want to do something, reach out, find a mentor, find someone to pour into you. This space is overwhelmingly collaborative. And yes, to what Richard and Batouly said, you can get started. Don't hold back, but also do your homework. Make sure that you are putting something good into the world. So don't be afraid, but do your homework. Find out, you don't want to do more harm than good, and just call on us. We're here for you. We are one giant team of sporty spice change makers.
Yes, I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Have a good night. Thank you for burning the candle here.
That's right.
At the end of the night, and then for Richard in the morning, for all the way across the world.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. Really look forward to just all the follow-up we'll do together and collective action and working together. So
yes. See you all in Haiti.
High fives.
Yeah, yes.
See ya.
Okay, take care.
Everyone.